Step 5, flow state in relationships. Maybe you're used to your mind wandering when you're in the middle of conversations. Maybe that happens when you're having sex and you start to fantasize about a different woman. When that's happening to you, it's happening to her. When you're fantasizing about fucking a different woman whilst you're having sex with your partner, she's fantasizing about being fucked by a different guy. Not being in a flow state for your relationships is horrible. So we need to fix that. Because otherwise, all you're going to have are these sad and stupid, shallow relationships, which are just pointless. If you're with someone who's constantly overthinking and they're not even present and they're not even conscious next to you, it's like they're not even there to begin with. If you're the one who's not present, if you're the one whose mind always wanders when you're next to people, there's no point in you even being there. There's no point in them inviting you for you to be there next time. People don't want to be around others who they can tell aren't very present because it's a very ugly trait to have. Imagine me and you were speaking. You're telling me something important and you can see that my mind just drifts. You can physically see it. You instantly would lose respect for me. And even if you somewhat liked me, the truth is you wouldn't want to spend much more time with me. Now, relationships are one of the most important parts of our lives. And in fact, in the book that I read for this video, it's called Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, like this guy who discovered the concept of flow states. He actually ended up finding that through his studies, work and relationships were the times when we were most happy, but also most upset and depressed. The kind of like two big extremes. Work can make you super, super happy because you get into a flow state and you feel super happy with yourself, but it can make you super depressed because you could hate your work, you hate the commute and everything else attached to it. Relationships can make you super happy because it can be you in a flow state with people that you love. It can be this loving relationship that you have with this beautiful feminine woman, and it could be your mother telling you stories, but it could also be this abusive boss. It could also be this dad who shouts at you. It could also be this girlfriend that you don't even like. So they're the two extremes now. If we can get to the top end of this extreme, and then you can start to live this very unique, happy life. Step 5.1, why relationships get boring. This is exactly what happens, and you can clarify me if I'm wrong, but you meet this girl and things are super, super exciting. You actually get butterflies on the thought of like meeting her in person or calling for the first time. You're shaking, right? That means that the challenge for this task is actually quite high. But with the girl that you end up attracting, usually that means that your skill was at the right level. So the challenge, the sort of difficulty of this situation was high, but your skill level was high. You meet her for another date, it's the same thing. Eventually you have sex and it feels like, it's really perfectly on level like this. Soon you've been in the relationship for 3 months, for 6 months, she's smelt your poop 50 times. The challenge has dropped, but your skill level is still here. This is why relationships feel kind of boring, because your skill's too good for it. This is kind of like playing level 1 on a video game, but just forever. Most couples are the equivalent of that. They're literally just playing like this beginner's game, even though they've got higher skills. So when the challenge and difficulty is very low, but your skill is higher, it results in boredom. You can imagine this, right? Imagine playing a video game that's too easy and then being forced to just play the same level over and over and over again. You'd get bored. You'd want to cheat. You'd want to go play a different video game. Now imagine if you made a pact with this original video game that you would only play that one and none more. You would cheat. Or you'd be tempted to every single day thinking, why the fuck is your relationship so boring when all those other games look so much more fun, right? So how do we fix this? How do we fix the big problem of relationships getting so boring? We need to just increase the challenge level, the difficulty level. This is our skills, this is the challenge, the difficulty. Naturally, when we spend time with someone, the challenge starts going down because we get used to them and our skill goes higher because, we start learning more things about relationships and our ability to express ourselves and to partner up and everything, right? So we're here. We start feeling bored. This is where most couples will live for their entire lives. But the couples who know about flow state will be constantly thinking to themselves, how do we increase challenge and difficulty in our relationship? Step 5.2, conversations. Conversations are a place that we can increase the challenge and difficulty in the relationships. Here's our current conversational skill, our current skill in relationships. Here's where we are. This is where our conversations are. You know that I've seen some studies that show like very sad facts that the average couple, like 30-year-old middle-aged somewhat couples, they literally have like 40 minutes of quality conversation a week. Most of their conversation is just like logistics. It's all just like, oh yeah, what are you going to do today at 5 p.m? Yeah, I'll go to this place, then I'll come, it's just boring stuff. They're not even like expanding their consciousness together. The couples who are on track to become like really loving and they understand flow state, what they'll do is they'll realize their skill's really high. So they'll say, okay, well, how can we use our skill? Let's ask each other harder questions. Let's explore the depths of each other's minds, because that's super, super interesting. So one person in the couple looks to the other one and says, what are you most afraid of? And the challenge goes up. And that one answers, and then they ask back, okay, so what are you most afraid of? That one goes up. What's the worst thing that ever happened to you as a child? Now you see, like, we're making the relationship, the conversations a little bit more difficult compared to the mundane, usual conversations that people get into. And suddenly we're at our skill level. And, you can go too far. You can maybe ask a question that's like super triggering or, personal or something. And you maybe aren't that close enough in the relationship to deal with that. And your skill is below that. Fair enough. But by asking these deep questions, these random things that you just want to almost pick the brain, explore the brain of your partner, it makes your experience with them more complex. Now, I must point out, this is not simping. This is not blue pill or something. In the modern space, it's so weird. You can be speaking about a wholesome relationship activity, and little kids will comment simp. How is this anything like simping at all? This is you with a partner that you have chosen, now leveling up the skill of love, which is mutually beneficial. That's awesome. So in these conversations, you can ask deeper questions and then follow the same principles that you know about flow states. Remember, so at first it might feel like a bit of a trudge. It feels kind of like a bit slow, like you're in that waist deep level of snow. After you've asked your partner a deep question, your mind might start to wander. You might get a little bit bored or agitated. You might want to change the topic, but you bring the attention back, just like we did with a task that we're doing on our computers. We use the exact same flow principles in conversations. So you must know that your mind is going to wander, and that for the first 5 or 10 or 20 minutes of the conversation, we're just going to constantly keep bringing it back and, maybe stare at one of their eyes or something to stay focused. Obviously, using good listening skills will help here. Don't just start to form your response to the question in your mind before they've finished talking. Let them talk. Try your best to absolutely listen to every tiny little pitch of their voice. Listen to their voice as if you're going to go deaf tomorrow for life. Every tonality, every way that they express themselves, see the sweetness in that. You can pretend that you've just been deaf for the past 20 years and their voice is the first thing that you hear. Listen to it with that much detail. You wouldn't interrupt. You wouldn't be thinking about what you're going to say next, would you? Now imagine if you do this enough that your partner starts to do this for you. Imagine if your partner listens to you so well that it seems like she literally is preparing to go deaf and she just wants to hear your tones and speech patterns. Think about the level of relationship you can get to when you just increase the challenge just in the conversations. Your actionable step, and do this right now, is to write down 3 open-ended, deep questions that you can ask anyone that you love. So maybe it's your girlfriend, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your brother. Some kind of deep question that would help you explore the depths of their mind. I know that I can just give you some ideas, but I'm not going to. I want you to really think about the person who you'd ask this question to and just ask yourself authentically, what would I actually kind of like to know about them? What don't I know about them already? What's an experience of their life that I would probably find super interesting to know? Write those 3 questions down and set an intention right here, right now, that you're going to ask one of these questions today. Whether it's in a video call or it's in person, you're going to ask one of them today to deepen your conversation. Step 5.3. Enlightened sex. I won't make this section PG-18 or anything, but it is something to consider. I've read a couple of books on spirituality, and one of the practices that seems to be of importance seems to be making love, not just basic sex that you've heard of, that you've seen on porn, or that you might have had with your girlfriend already. You go from having normal sex to having sex where you focus on merging together and kind of almost imagining that you're one person, that you've combined as a whole. And the way that you start this, I can't tell you advanced tactics, but I can tell you the way to start, which is super interesting. And it is to unkink some blocks that we might have to be able to make love properly. From an early age, there's been blocks placed onto our sexuality, our physical body, our emotional state, our psychology. And these things have actually made it harder for us to like genuinely be in love with our partners. So this, what I'm talking about isn't like degeneracy. This is something that you'd want to practice with your wife, right? So that you'd really get like a strong tie to her. So even if you know you're not like a degenerate, even if you're like a strong, convicted Muslim, you'd want to watch this because you'd want to be able to practice this when the time is there. But the saddening truth is, if you've watched porn for years, you've largely lost your ability to do this. The concept of being a teenager who's watching porn, what is it? It's shy. It's dark. It's away in your room. You're not making any noises. You often you feel kind of naughty and restricted, and you feel quite shameful because you're watching other people. You're watching something you shouldn't watch, and that's a feeling of shame. And you start to associate these feelings with sexuality from a very early age. You start to death grip your penis, and so you lose sensation in there. You shallowly breathe, or in fact, you kind of hold your breath when you usually masturbate. We practiced this wrong way of making love for 10 years, for 1,000 times, maybe more, probably about 5,000 times we practiced. They say oh, it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. We mastered the skill of masturbation, but masturbating in the sort of normal porn focused way starts to really deteriorate your ability to actually make love properly. So the first big tip that I can give you is to be able to breathe properly. What you'll find, if you're very new to this, you won't feel this at all, right? So you won't feel anything significant, but let me just tell you of what you should do for the rest of your life. You want to focus on really breathing so deeply so that your breath goes from your nose all the way down as low as possible, down the front of your body towards literally your genitals. You want to see where you can feel it up to. So if you do this with me right now, take a big, sort of deep breath through your nose. Where do you feel it kind of stop? I felt it just below my belly button. Not good enough. The kind of deep breaths we need to be taking should literally genuinely move our balls. So if you, it's kind of weird, but if you want to do this, if you just want to look at your balls for a second, if you're being honest with yourself and not twitching yourself on purpose, you probably won't see it. The way that you'll see, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do now. If you straighten out your back a little bit, sit up a little bit straighter. In fact, it's a lot easier if you stand up. Sitting seems to be really bad for this, which I always just think, isn't that a weird coincidence that we were made to sit down in shitty chairs for 80 years straight in school, but whatever. What you want to do is take more of a forceful breath and push the air into your balls. And it's just about the last part. If you can really breathe it in, it's the last part. And this is super hard because you're not going to do this 24/7. But the idea is we need to be taking much deeper breaths than we currently are. These shallow little half breaths where our stomach doesn't even rise are very problematic. This is very interesting, right? So the book that I use is my guidebook to life, The Way of the Superior Man. There's a passage in there which says, the principal bodily key of mastering the world and women is to maintain a full and open front of the body. And you do this by breathing fully. Think about that. The principal bodily key, the main thing we can do with our body is to be able to just be open in the front of our bodies. And we do that with our breath. This is the most important thing that you could use your body for, in the world, apparently. How interesting is that? Open up the front of your body. Think about all the shit that we've done, this hunched over posture that's been closing our bodies down. Do the exact opposite. Sit up straight, chest out, shoulders back. Breathe. Let the flow of breath go down deeper and deeper and deeper over time. Trust me when I say that this is a long process. I've been doing this for, I don't know, about a solid year is when I first learned about this practice. And it's only in the last few months that it's really taken off because I've really been focused on it a lot more, reminding myself. It's going to take a lot of work, but I'm just going to motivate you. When you learn to breathe properly, you can have sex for as long as you want. You don't need to bust. You can literally choose when you want to. So there's sometimes, not always, but there's sometimes I can last for as long as I want now. Genuinely hours. This is like your God-given right, and it's been taken away from us because of the shitty modern world. You must be able to breathe properly, especially when it comes to having sex and being like sexually stimulated. You'll find that when you are about to have sex, when you're about to enter like a sexual situation, you will absolutely start to hold your breath or to breathe shallowly. When that happens, you've almost got to like let your stomach relax and breathe more deeply into that. So all of this is so that when you do really want to level up your love with this woman that you're about to have sex with, you'll be able to like almost breathe love into every part of your body rather than being mentally sort of constrained with like fascination or, you know, like literally with this obsession of needing to ejaculate. Most guys literally will have sex in two ways. Either one, they'll be mentally fantasizing, or two, they'll be obsessing over like the feeling of ejaculation. And this is like that. This is like literally level 0 sex. This is like literally as bad as your sex life could be. Porn stars and all this stuff, none of them know this. If you want to hear like good sex advice, you don't want to hear it from like real world people. You want to hear it from spiritual people. The book, The Way of the Superior Man, chapter 46 can help you there.